The Virtue of Playfulness by Boomer Trujillo. Chapter 4 The Virtue of Playfulness. Most animals cannot live well without playing. In fact, play is so important that it can serve as a marker of well being. This is because play provides both positive and negative indications. Stressed animals do not play, and play teaches valuable lessons. For example, play teaches rats how to cope with the anxiety of unpredictable environments and actors. So, play deprived rats cannot coordinate their bodies with non stationary objects, and they become stressed in uncertain situations. This means that play deprived rats can neither mount potential mates nor make friends. Another case is dolphins. Some teach each other skills while playing, for example, to use sponges to scrape the seafloor for food. Play deprived dolphins, therefore, would lose out on skills for optimal survival as well as social connections. Play can impact almost every aspect of life. For individual animals, the complex maneuvers of play train their neuromuscular systems and psychological resilience to stress. For groups of animals, the social interactions that occur during play create bonds and transmit skills. During play, animals hone their bodies, test their minds, familiarize themselves with their kin, and interact with other species in the wider environment. Simply, play prepares animals for life. The stakes are even higher for humans, and the point holds across age groups. Beginning around age 5, children mimic and manipulate rules, values, and social roles in the games that they play. This sets the stage for adopting social roles and coordinating group behavior. Games, rituals, and art transform larval toddlers into adults and adolescents who understand the abstract world of value and the complex dynamics of social interactions. But play is also important for adults who already understand these things. Play helps adults rest from work and stimulate themselves after drudgery, a trend found on every inhabitable continent in numerous cross-cultural surveys. More poignant, play deprivation breaks people, and these broken people make broken communities. Psychologist Stuart Brown studied dozens of murderers at the infamous prison in Huntsville. In the prisoners' lives, he consistently found childhood play deprivation. This was especially obvious in the case of Charles Whitman, the sniper who killed 17 people at the University of Texas. Play maintains psychological health in the face of toil and obligations, and people without play cannot work well, much less live well or create just communities. The action of play is undoubtedly necessary for a good life. However, despite these observations about play, thinkers quarrel endlessly about it. For example, Plato in Republic warns against improper play in the ways it can deform your soul, whereas Jean-Jacques Rousseau in Emile deems play a pearl of authentic goodness to be preserved from childhood onward. Philosophers disagree about which types of play are good or bad, as well as just how good or bad they are. Rats run, fish swim, philosophers disagree, fine. But usually philosophers understand where the disagreements are, and that is what is so disconcerting about play. Especially with this topic, philosophers seem to talk past each other. The standard philosophical strategy is to argue about the definition of play and the propriety of the action of play. Many excellent scholars have done and continue to do this work. However, I want to take a different route. In this chapter, I argue that a character trait of playfulness can help us to make sense of the disparate claims about play. I hope that my theory of playfulness can do two things. 1. Organize the plurality of claims about play by using a framework of virtues and vices. And 2. Defend playfulness as indispensable to a good life. My description of playfulness should show why some philosophers deride play but others revere it. It should also sketch a trait that can guide our actions and ethical reflections on play and living well. While my characterization will not produce a list of necessary and sufficient conditions, it should be enough to distinguish play from non-play and good play from bad play. My goal here is not to set strict semantic limits, but rather to propose some practical boundaries, even if occasionally porous, and I invite other philosophers to contribute to this ongoing debate. My characterization will hinge on one curiosity about humans. We face leisure time explicitly. We ask each other things like, what are you doing this weekend? And what kind of things are you into when you're not working? And we can use our practical reason and complex sociality during free time, as in playing games or organizing parties. Using our capacities well during leisure, I argue, is being playful. In other words, we have time that we do not need to spend on mere survival, so we face choices about how to use our leisure. It is here that the virtue of playfulness helps. Playfulness helps us to use our leisure time well by resting, developing ourselves, and engaging our communities via intrinsically valued activities that lead us toward better lives. And without playfulness, we neglect creativity, innovation, and inquiry into the values that we assume in our individual and communal lives. A quick stylistic note: I generally use feminine pronouns for the virtuous person and masculine ones for the vicious person as a way to clarify the back and forth discussion between virtues and vices. Leisure time as the sphere of playfulness. The goal of life is to be happy. Aristotle thinks that we stand the best chance of accomplishing happiness by becoming as good of people as possible by developing virtues and avoiding vices. For Aristotle, the virtues are the moral character traits that help us to regulate emotions or spheres of life that all humans face. And each virtue regulates a unique sphere within the Aristotelian system. Cumulatively, the virtues therefore add up to a set of moral character traits that we need to develop in order to live well. Each virtue helps us to face a different aspect of life in the best way. Whether or not we want to, we repeatedly interact with the many spheres of life. These interactions mean that we cannot avoid forming dispositions in relation to them. Life happens, we react. Life happens in the same way again, we react in the same way again, and eventually we develop a disposition toward a specific aspect of life. The Aristotelian hope is that we learn to take control of this process so that the disposition that we do develop are the ones that can help us to flourish. For example, we cannot help but face fear, so we develop courage, cowardice, or foolhardiness over a lifetime. Or when pleasures present themselves, we become temperate, indulgent, or ascetic through our responses. It is important to emphasize here that it would be a bad idea to let our dispositions form on their own, automatically and unreflectively. Part of being human means that we think about why we do what we do and how we accomplish what we aim to do. This is called practical reason, and it is central to Aristotle's system. Additionally, humans are social animals, and we have the opportunity to talk with others, thus making our actions comprehensible to our friends, mentors, and community members, who then can offer advice or coordinate with us. This is the complex sociality that humans exhibit in our interactions with one another. Both practical reason and sociality deeply impact the development of virtues and the ability to manage the competing goods of life on the way to happiness. Some might ask, why care about forming a good character? Aristotle replied to similar critics by noting that people literally destroy their own lives by exclusively pursuing wealth or manliness or whatever value they take to be the most important in life, when in actuality, it was the wrong thing to go after. The stakes of developing our characters are no more or no less than our happiness or misery. Malformed, vicious character endangers ethical life, but a carefully cultivated, virtuous character improves it. Someone who is an ascetic coward will be worse off than someone who developed temperance and courage. In other words, someone who enjoys life's pleasures and avoids debilitating fear lives better than someone who shuns pleasures and crumples under anxiety. Who we are matters for how we live. So, for playfulness to be a virtue, there must be some situation or emotion that is universal to human life that playfulness regulates to make us happier. I propose that playfulness regulates our leisure time. By leisure time, I mean the time that we have in spurts or stretches that is free from immediate concerns for somatic, psychological, social, or economic survival. Leisure time, in my view, can include a range of activities. It can include rest, relaxation, recreation, or simply doing nothing. It can include idleness or those activities that are low effort, unconcerned with worldly affairs, and taken up simply for their sheer joy. It can include play, especially the activities that are chosen for themselves and contain some degree of fun. It can include more intense activities such as learning, creating art, playing a sport, or anything that might take a long-term, high-energy commitment. Additionally, any and all of these activities can be directed primarily at ourselves or at our communities. We can strive for self-improvement or social engagement. I do not think that we need more than general characterizations here of each activity that I listed. Strict and uncontested definitions of leisure and its activities are difficult to come by. Nonetheless, it would be disingenuous of me not to point out that many scholars connect leisure to the meaning and purpose of life. Philosopher Sarah Brody, I think, explains why. She connects the lack of necessity in leisure time, as well as the activities that we pursue during it, to our deepest values. She writes, "This was the quintessential fruit of leisure. It came into being not because it matched a requirement, but because it was a new thing to love." Leisure is born of freedom and reveals our love, and how we live our freedom and choose our loves reflects the deepest values that we hold. Leisure's prominence and importance in human life beg its confrontation. Aristotle argued that leisure is necessary for both people and communities to flourish. And happiness is thought to depend on leisure, for we are busy that we may have leisure and make war that we may live in peace. We show ourselves worthy of freedom when we use our free time well, and inversely, we show ourselves debased whenever we pursue nothing but useful or practical things. This point holds not only for individuals, but for entire states too. Remember Aristotle's remarks on the Spartans and imperialism. Communities and people who do not know how to be free end up destroying themselves. This is why he advocated so strongly for a state-sponsored educational program, and this program connected times of peace and leisure to gymnasion and musicae, athletic training, and the arts of the muses, or more colloquially and contemporarily, almost every kid's favorite time of the school day: physical education, recess, music, and art. The liberal arts, everything from play to philosophical theory, are part of the education that all citizens need. This is because they teach us to be free. They teach us to be human. In Aristotle's works, play is usually near these conversations. Play contributes to childhood development, and play is a medicine to help adults through labor and drudgery. Aristotle himself did not even consider playfulness as a candidate for being a virtue, but Aristotle did identify a sphere of life essential to flourishing for individuals and to justice for communities: leisure. And in those same conversations, he consistently referenced play and all activities related to the sphere of leisure, such as relaxation and rest. So it seems right to pay special attention to leisure and its connections to play. It is puzzling that Aristotle himself said nothing about any virtue that may regulate such an important sphere as leisure and crucial activity as play, especially because both get mentioned in his most famous practical works repeatedly. But such a crucial oversight is why I propose that playfulness here, as the virtue that regulates what we do in our leisure, play included among its activities. Contemporary scholarship largely concurs with Aristotle's arguments that leisure is important. Scholars argue that leisure is a near universal feature of human life today, even if only in small stints of time. Leisure is accessible too. People can exert control over their leisure time more easily than controlling their economic power, social status, or physical health. People can enjoy leisure for free through activities like hiking, running, reading, and listening to music. Moreover, how people spend their leisure time dramatically affects how satisfied they feel with their lives. The more leisure time they have, the better they feel. The better they use it, the better they feel. To me, all of this evidence adds up to a virtue existing with respect to leisure time. Moreover, because of leisure's prevalence, we cannot help but develop dispositions in relation to it. We all do something with that time, whether choosing to laze around or fill our schedules with certification programs and competitive leagues. Even in smaller bits of time, we can choose between doom-scrolling Facebook, shitposting on TikTok, running language exercises on Duolingo, or solving chess puzzles. This repeated exposure to spending our leisure time in certain ways leads to habit. Moreover, the habits surrounding our free time impact deep features of our personal characters and social lives. We often choose our friends based on common hobbies, and we discuss our hobbies frequently. Quality of life changes depending on the amount of leisure and its engagement. Leisure activities serve many psychological purposes too. They often allow us to gain a sense of mastery within the activity, and these activities enrich our lives. Also, the activities usually become outlets for stress and emotions, and they help someone escape everyday worries. Leisure activities improve self-esteem and allow one to achieve focus and control in creative expression. They entangle themselves in identity formation and self-fulfillment. Additionally, how we spend our leisure time and have fun reveals a lot about our psychological lives. Sometimes we compensate for our non leisurely lives. People with stressful careers sometimes need that fifth time streaming Star Trek from start to finish while they scroll through memes on the internet. But in the same regard, sometimes our leisure reveals our shortcomings as people. We may sense that we need to use leisure well, but under the guises of harmless fun or just joking, we might also reveal our insensitivities to our own vices or to our own toxic effects on our communities. We could do this, for example, by only ever spending our leisure time binging Taco Bell and trolling people on the internet. Leisure has moral consequences for who we become, how we assess what we need, and how we form communities by interacting with those around us. The celebration of leisure and play is not controversial in the abstract. The problem comes in considering how we should spend that time. Not all leisure times are equal. If we do not use our leisure time well, we do not live much better than people who lack leisure altogether. For example, many social scientists are skeptical of spending leisure time watching TV, as it seems to lack the benefits of active play. Children who only spend time watching TV or playing on iPads fare worse than children who play sports, tinker outdoors, or experience games with other children face to face. Additionally, activities like dancing have much longer lasting physical, psychological, and social benefits than watching TV. Dancers train their bodies, form communities, and immerse themselves in emotional music. All of these things elicit profound short term and enduring long term effects. TV watching, as prevalent and accessible as it is, might de stress its viewers temporarily, but it does little by way of improving cardiovascular health, forming supportive communities, or evoking deep and long lasting emotions. Leisure activities have different benefits, and we must find a way to assess and compare activities. After all, leisure activities have risks too. For example, extreme sports present high physical risks compared to others. Base jumping, skydiving done by jumping off of buildings, antenna, bridges, or cliffs, carries a fatality risk of roughly 1 in 60 participants. But it also pushes the boundaries of human accomplishment, bringing thousands of dollars and viral popularity to the best athletes. By contrast, the habits of a nerd may be boring to some, but the risks of reading, watching movies, and socializing over meals are substantially less than those of riding motorcycles, bare knuckle boxing, or doing designer drugs. Then again, the high is not quite the same either. This is not intended to strawman risky activities or shame nerds. Rather, I want to emphasize that different activities bear different disadvantages, and people must make these assessments themselves. Complications multiply whenever we consider how politically transgressive leisure activities can be. To conservative communities, rock music worships the devil, co-ed dancing promotes loose morals, and drinking at a tavern with other races and queer folk indicates a character flaw. There are places in the world where people get beaten for drinking alcohol or much worse for non-marital relationships. Spending leisure in play can be creative and egalitarian, and in communities that prefer hierarchies, play threatens social organization. Even in philosophy, both Plato and Aristotle warned against base forms of play because it can train children to have bad habits and it can normalize perverse actions. These bad people, they worried, end up bad citizens. There seems to be a communal stake in the ways that we use our leisure time in how we play. George Santayana once remarked, "To the art of working well, a civilized race would add the art of playing well." There is also a much more contemporary concern about games and play. C.T. Wen argues that games affect our very agency, our capacity for experiencing the world, interacting with values, and creating our standards and life trajectories. Wen worries that repeated, unreflective interaction with games can ingrain in us harmful patterns of thought and being. For example, consider the ways that games often have a singular and engrossing win condition, whereby players are invited to use everything and everyone to accomplish that end. Might ingraining that particular skill in game tempt players to use out of game all their own values, goods, and projects, and the values, good, and projects of others as mere means to their end of winning the game of life? In other words, might people oversimplify life by thinking about it like a game? Could games instill the mindset of Bernie Madoff doing everything for money, or Caesar vying for every shred of power? Wen is not worried so much about violence in video games. He is more worried about games making us think that things outside of the game might also have such simple win conditions and such permissive rules to do anything to achieve them. Relatedly, he considers the clear metrics of games: the green bars that fill after gathering a resource, the health bar that decreases after damage, the statistical breakdown of a player's strength or charisma, or the end screen full of scores and statistics. Life is not so simple. We do not often know which values are operative at a given time in our lives or in social space. We do not often know precisely how, for example, working an extra shift to earn more money will affect our health, family bonds, pursuit of hobbies, or political engagement. Games offer a fantasy of clear, commensurable, and rankable values. Maybe we see then the allure of striving after money like Madoff or power like Caesar, which is easy to measure and manage. Wen worries that we will be drawn to systems, institutions, social practices, and activities that closely resemble games, and we may be tempted to adjust our own goals to make our lives more closely resemble gameplay. The worry is that gamers may treat their own lives like the games that they play, not with violence and sex, as conservative pundits panic about, but in a deep, unseen, and psychological way that makes us yearn for artificial clarity, quantifiability, and winnability in the face of life's complex vagueness and sublimity. Athletes treat everything as a sport, actors everything as a performance, entertainers everything as a party, MBAs everything as an optimization of statistics. The same mind that we use for leisure is the same mind that we use for life, and the ways that we act and think in leisure should not always be applied to moral and political life. So maybe we should find some guidelines. My question then is this: how can we assess leisure and all of the activities that we take up within it? Philosophy so far has been of little help, and no traditional virtue directly applies. I argue with Aristotle that we need leisure, and I argue with philosophers who argue that leisure and play have ethical stakes. I also realize that not all leisure activities are the same and vary widely with culture, interest, and demographics. But even in the face of the plurality of activities and choices, I think that there is a solution, considering a virtue of playfulness. Playfulness as a virtue. Playfulness is the right way of responding to leisure time. In the virtue of playfulness, we get a character trait that can help distinguish good from bad play, no matter the variety of things that we do. And we can reconcile the accounts of philosophers who deride and celebrate play. Just like any virtue, playfulness is psychologically complex, so I must describe its components. The psychology of playfulness. Cognitive aspects. Playfulness has a large cognitive component. It involves understanding oneself and what one needs somatically, psychologically, and socially. A playful person will always ask, what is it that I most need from my leisure time? This takes self-awareness in the ability to assess oneself, and it takes practical reasoning in the ability to assess which goods, games, and experiences are both valuable and accessible to meet these demands. Humans require many things, and playful people use their leisure to rest, develop themselves, and engage their communities. Part of playfulness involves deciding to rest the parts of us that ache or rekindle the parts of us that have been snuffed out by travail. So battered and dulled, we turn to our leisure, and we must select among the many things that we could do. Sometimes I need a few hours of watching Jean-Luc Picard solve intergalactic problems. Sometimes I need to catch up with friends and family on the phone. Other times I need to challenge myself by running, lifting weights, or learning a new Polyphia song on guitar. The cognitive components of playfulness help me to balance out competing values of life and the goals that I have for my time. But how? To make decisions about how to use our leisure, Aristotle uses eudaimonia to keep people focused on the holistic goal of living the best human life possible. Similarly, the playful person uses happiness to compare herself against. This enables her to see how best to move forward. Playfulness involves reflection during her free time to assess how she lives in the small moments and long build-ups to life's goals. One thing is crucial: the playful person spends leisure with growth in mind. People might object to my characterization of playfulness already, saying that it seems too cognitive and unfun. It feels as though there is a looming paradox akin to the hedonic treadmill, where the more one strives to be playful, the further one gets away from it. After all, what is worse than someone trying to be playful or forcing others to have fun? Such a person usually deludes himself and annoys everyone else. However, this is where Aristotle can help. Virtues are not just about the information that we consider, the principles and syllogisms, or the skillful know-how to do things. Yes, virtues involve this, but they also involve feelings, motivations, and the pursuit of full, effortless, sincere actions. People who are not fully playful, but working to cultivate playfulness, may seem thought-heavy and clumsy, and they may grumble at assessing their free time and trying to find the best way to use it. But with more practice, it becomes easier, and people eventually feel better as they develop good habits, stay committed to leisure activities, and connect their free time to self-development. For Aristotelians, the goal of ethical action is never a mere set of actions or rules. Feelings and manner of execution matter too. People are not fully playful until they understand what needs to be done, feel good about doing it, stay motivated to do it, and sincerely act each time the virtue merits. So, if there is a ludic treadmill here, a place in life where our exertion to be playful feels as though it brings us no closer to our goal, it is only a problem during the initial cultivation of the virtue. After developing playfulness further along, the naturalness with which one acts provides a way off the treadmill. Learning curves exist, even for games, but once the game is learned, the enjoyment deepens. Additionally, the mere existence of a learning curve and the cognitive drag on initial flights does nothing to shoot down playfulness. Moreover, the alternative of being unreflective about leisure or using non-cognitive standards or faculties seems worse. It takes judgment to organize the many personal and social demands that we have. Feeling things out and doing the most convenient things will not always lead to the best behavior. A good example of needing cognition and social support is mild depression. I deal with this. And when in a rut, the last things that I want to do are eat healthily, work out, or socialize. But those are exactly the things that dig me out. Often, I can do what I need by thinking through things and motivating myself. Sometimes, though, friends and physicians help me along. What I hope this shows is that emotions cannot be counted on in all circumstances, and it is often our own cognition, as well as the cognition and support of others, that helps us through things more reliably. Mood and emotional aspects. However, playfulness is not all in the thinking parts of the brain. Mood and emotions matter too. I think Aristotle could affirm some aspects of contemporary behavioral science on this topic. For example, psychologist Mark Davis found that the creativity so crucial to playfulness is at its peak when a player is excited, but not too excited. If a player is hyper-excitable, his thinking is disordered, but if he is not excited at all, then creativity lags. Philosophers who have studied playfulness also agree. For example, Lukács Mades and Emily Ryle take as essential to playfulness positive mental states such as energy, enthusiasm, spontaneity, and anticipation. And Michael Ridge highlights the centrality of fun. Moritz Schlick also emphasizes the importance of mood and emotion in playing when he argued that the meaning of life lay in the joy of playing. Moods and emotions matter because they undermine playfulness or distract from it entirely, or they can. Additionally, mood can distinguish mean-spirited play from genuine play. Psychologist Nina Lieberman observed that, in children, she could distinguish between friendly teasing and caustic mockery by observing the moods of those involved. Mockery and bullying had ill effects, but friendly teasing was consistent with children who could be spontaneous, joyful, and humorous. Playful children seemed more creative in positive mood contexts. The work on moods led biologists Patrick Bateson and Paul Martin to distinguish playful play from general play. For Bateson and Martin, playful play involves a positive mood, which inclines animals to spontaneous and flexible behavior. By contrast, in bad forms of play, the mood is different and the creative spontaneity withers. Relaxation and unselfing. The last psychological component of playfulness that I want to discuss is relaxation. Aristotle mentioned that one of the limits of pleasure is fatigue of our faculties. We get tired, even when doing things that we love, and there is no way to sustain pleasures continuously. Taken generally, this point argues that we need rest, even in positive contexts, and from pleasurable experiences. During her leisure, the playful person participates in activities that rest and renew her to face life. This can happen in many ways, depending on the context. Sometimes, a playful person will select leisure activities that provide an environment that allows her more control, autonomy, or power than her non leisurely life, as in a game of Minecraft or a hike through a familiar trail. This can wrest her from a chaotic career or lifestyle. Oppositely, a playful person might choose leisure activities that provide unpredictability, spontaneity, and novelty. If her career or life is monotonous, improvisational comedy or immersive art installations like Meow Wolf can restore wonder. And in yet different circumstances, a playful person may shun structured activities or packed itineraries in order to provide herself with time to do nothing except spend it however she wants when she arrives at that moment. So called time affluence is crucial to life satisfaction. Just having a spot in your schedule where you can enjoy a coffee or a nap in a hammock can make you feel more in control and afford you a chance to appreciate life. Philosopher Jules Evans takes these observations further by arguing for the necessity of ecstatic experiences, times when our consciousness expands outside of the self, both leaving the troubles and limits of the self behind and moving beyond to find new possibilities for the self. These experiences, he argues, can heal and inspire us, and they may be found anywhere as diverse as a movie theater or a mosh pit. Aristotle noticed the same phenomenon. He ends his Politics with a discussion about music, and he condones for some people the use of inspiring, passionate melodies that whip some people into mystic frenzies that appear to purge and heal them from harmful emotions. Iris Murdoch called a similar process unselfing, what she found essential to living well. She details an example where she is brooding over some damage done to her reputation. Anxious and full of resentment, she stares out of her window, but then she sees a kestrel hovering. That moment changes everything. She moves from her anxious, self-obsessed, aching point of view to the kestrel, outside of herself. She simply takes in its beauty and experiences nothing else. Then, when she returns to herself, she is transformed, and the previous matter has lost its importance. She explains later that goodness is connected to unselfing, trying to transcend our unnatural or our usual selfish consciousness toward a virtuous consciousness that can see the world as it really is, not as our anxieties and aspirations might have it be. It is precisely in our breaks from psychological and laborious occupations that we come to one of her central realizations. By opening our eyes, we do not necessarily see what confronts us. We are anxiety-ridden animals. Our minds are continually active, fabricating an anxious, usually self-preoccupied, often falsifying veil which partially conceals the world. Our states of consciousness differ in quality. Our fantasies and reveries are not trivial and unimportant. They are profoundly connected with our energies and our ability to choose and act. And if quality of consciousness matters, then anything which alters consciousness in the direction of unselfishness, objectivity, and realism is to be connected with virtue. Relaxation, even in something as simple as letting our mind wander from natural beauty to creative fantasies, can rest us and make us better. By getting outside of ourselves or getting distance from certain experiences, we can return to those matters with a more grounded perspective and renewed resolve. Sometimes, people underestimate the value of rest because of the simplicity of its descriptions. Do nothing, stop thinking, just be. But as anyone who meditates will tell you, doing nothing and clearing your mind can be as difficult as they are important. The main point is that the demands of playfulness are not demands for constant busyness. A virtuous person knows what she needs for flourishing, including taking it easy, for example, by sipping coffee in the sun or sending memes to friends on the phone. In fact, it is quite probable that contemporary playful people in America might choose to do less. There is some empirical evidence to suggest that, despite more leisure time, certain people and families experience more busyness and report that they have less time to enjoy. This runs precisely counter to the virtue of playfulness and happiness. While the playful person does have obligations to flourish and to use leisure time well, this does not mean cramming a schedule full of activities. The holistic value of happiness, taken as an entire life lived well by someone with a fully developed personality, is precisely what should prevent a culture of busyness from taking hold. That is why I stress using happiness in deliberation in the cognitive components above. But here we are talking about feelings and how vital the sense of rest is. I think it has always been a temptation to do more. As far back as 2nd century Rome, Marcus Aurelius was warning himself about something similar. If you seek tranquility, do less better. Because most of what we say and do is not essential. If you can eliminate it, you'll have more time and more tranquility. Similarly, Friedrich Nietzsche in 1800s Germany noticed, all of you who are in love with hectic work and whatever is fast, new, strange, you find it hard to bear yourselves. Your diligence is escape and the will to forget yourself. If you believed more in life, you would hurl yourself less into the moment. But you do not have enough content in yourselves for waiting, not even for laziness. In other words, Nietzsche noticed something duplicitous about people who maintain a constant state of busyness and adventure, often in the guise of finding themselves. Here, it is a mock type of playfulness because it looks like play, but forgets happiness and virtue generally. Nietzsche rightly criticizes a lot of people fraught with fear of missing out and running from themselves, avoiding who they are. He emphasizes that part of what keeps them from sitting still is that they lack inner content. In this way, laziness becomes a test for these people to sit with their inner emptiness. While I disagree with the hyperbole of Nietzsche, I think that he gets one crucial thing right. People who cannot rest are indicating deep disquiet. This is why Marcus Aurelius recommends doing less as a path toward tranquility. Rest becomes a time for just being where you are. And sometimes it is not easy to come to terms with where you are. But virtuously playful people do, and they do not judge themselves harshly, nor do they feel the need to do everything at once. Playful people know when and how to sit still. The point of these qualifications is that relaxation precludes micromanaging and optimizing every microsecond of one's schedule. The playful person will play chess with her friends, the busy person will buy new chess sets, fiddle with the board, order precisely the right drink, etc. The latter looks like being playful, but is actually erratic and distracted. Like Aristotle said, relaxation prepares us to return to life refreshed. From her leisure, the playful person will get new experiences, controlled outlets, social contact, or solitary rest, and any of these can allow her to relax. Sometimes this means lounging in bed for an extra hour. Sometimes it means playing chess or hitting the gym. In any case, relaxation renews people to return to non-leisurely life. The benefits apply to more than reinvigorated work or labor. They also apply to social interactions and mundane life. The virtuously playful person uses her leisure in ways that improve her mood, her thinking, herself, and this reverberates throughout her life. Characteristics of playfulness. Beyond these general psychological descriptions, I think playful people exhibit specific characteristics that define them as virtuously playful. At the heart of being a playful person is a person who can approach her leisure time and its activities with seriousness, creativity, humility, optimism, and sociality, all while avoiding related vices. Seriousness. A central characteristic of playfulness is seriousness. Despite the light mood or relaxing effects, leisure's impact on the self and others shows that a playful person should be serious. This largely comes from the need to consider how to spend leisure time and how to assess its successes or failures. A playful person not only entertains whims, as most do. She is characterized by finding activities, hobbies, and projects to commit herself to even in small moments of leisure. Sports, liberal arts, home crafts, games, and relationships can all be ways of spending leisure. And the playful person commits herself to these activities, and she puts time enough into the activity to gain basic competence. She strives for improvement and prefers some results and products over others. If she lifts weights during her leisure, for example, she aims to do so safely and effectively. And if she bakes, she treats differently the charred chicken pot pie and the croissant that flakes when you open it. Once competent, she makes into her own the activities done and the product finished. She cares about what she does and how what she does reflects her. By contrast, a flaky person, someone who does not commit himself to something to get good at it or to get to know a community, hastily moves on to new activities and lets each frustration or setback end his engagement with the current one. The flaky person is the ideas man, the person who schemes but never executes. This could be someone who tries dozens of sports but never commits to one long enough to learn its rules. Or it could be a person who noodles on guitar and learns a couple of chords but then never completes a whole song. Casual play is sometimes fine. Yet, if it is always casual, a flaky person does not develop the advantages that come with serious engagement. But this is not to say that commitment above everything is characteristic of the playful person. Obsessiveness can take root in the severe person. The severe person stays committed to activities at the neglect of the holistic achievement of happiness or the development of friendships with others. He can take winning too seriously, focusing only on calculable statistics like win percentage or kill-death ratio in Fortnite. Or he could pursue external goods like money or fame rather than cooperation, socialization, or the good of the leisure activity itself. This can burden everything with gravity, or it can leave an audience with the sense that the severe person misses the entire point of playing or having leisure. The severe person does not enjoy much, and he does not play freely or fluidly. Being playful involves balancing both the flaky and severe impulses. The playful person perseveres through challenges. She makes efforts to develop special knowledge, training, and skills. She engages deeply and seriously with the community that plays in the way that she does, and she integrates the play as a facet of her identity. A playful person learns to play competently and understands the reasons for why she plays. She resists the temptation to make play into life or dismiss it as trivial. Play is necessary for living well, but it is not the only thing necessary for living well. The playful person understands this. Creativity. The playful person is also creative within boundaries, which she sometimes pushes. Here, Vices clarify what I mean by creativity. The rigid person deleteriously commits himself to the rules in excruciating detail. The narrow focus on the rules prevents him from exploring, communicating openly with other players, or seeing which rules can be stretched in which ways or which activities can be engaged in. A rigid person drains the vivacity from play by treating organic experiences like mechanical operations. On the other hand, the unruly person is equally vicious. He refuses to learn values or honor boundaries, and while his transgressive personality may strike himself as valiantly creative, it is far from that. He cannot create because all he does is criticize. He cannot play because all he does is satisfy his own whims without coordinating with others. The unruly person is irredeemably antisocial, isolated by his own selfish goals to enjoy the game his own way. He is like Johann Huizinga's spoil sport. Huizinga observes that society tolerates cheaters because they take games seriously, even if winning nefariously. But society, he argues, is disgusted by spoil sports. Spoil sports refuse to play and thus spoil the fun for everyone. Rather than participate in the collective work of playing and maintaining the play world, the spoil sport bursts the imaginative and ludic bubbles, ruining play for everyone involved. The playful person finds a way between these two vices. She is creative because she takes the time to familiarize herself with the hobbies, games, or activities that she is involved in. She develops the skill or intimacy that creativity requires. She respects the activity enough to understand what she engages in, and she learns to perform competently. But then she moves beyond this. By learning the spirit of the hobby, game, or experience, the creative person learns the melody on which she can improvise. She can generate novel ways of realizing the implicit and explicit goals within practices. She learns her craft and then changes it. But no one can change something that she has not respected, nor can she be novel without learning the history of what came before. Humility. Playfulness involves failure. This happens in learning the initial rules and practices of games or hobbies, as well as exploring new ideas and skills. This necessitates humility. As a playful person tries to create and innovate, failure multiplies. But none of the failures deter the truly playful person. She stays committed and coachable. If failure stops a playful person from learning, exploring, or innovating, then he is fragile. The fragile person, in the sense that I'm thinking here, avoids failure because he takes failure as indicative of a character flaw. Or he assigns too much worth to the opinion of any audience to his failures. This prevents him from persevering, which prevents him from bettering himself, his performance in relevant activities, and the communities that surround either. This is the person who wants to write, but cannot stand rereading his own work because the ideas sit stalely and the prose reads clumsily, not at all like his grandiose inspiration. The mistake is not the failure. Rather, it is neglecting to move forward afterward. But the playful person is not reckless either. The reckless person does not learn from failure, and like the spoilsport or the unruly person, he moves from disaster to disaster. The reckless person has no regard for the way in which he plays or the way he uses his leisure insofar as it takes the brunt of his pent-up energy and frustrations. A reckless person does not mind failure, but he does not mind it because he does not realize he has failed. A fragile person is someone who underestimates his ability A fragile person is someone who underestimates his ability and pessimistically surrenders to failure. A reckless person is someone who overestimates his ability and foolishly assumes success, never minding the debris in his path. By contrast, a playful person learns from failures and moves forward. Her humility allows her not to take herself too seriously, so she can stomach failure's bitter taste. But she also takes herself seriously enough to stay invested in the projects at hand. This allows a proper self-assessment, and it allows her to get good at the skill. Optimism. Most of the activities that people pursue during leisure involve some amount of uncertainty, as do self-assessment and self-development. No one knows who will win a game for certain. No one can say whether a craft that one works on will turn out as desired. No one can say whether a performance or activity will live up to expectations. For these reasons, the playful person is also optimistic about outcomes. She believes that she can win the game, that her craft will turn out given enough practice, that the experience of going out or doing something will give her what she wants. Leisure and play are training grounds for optimism and managing expectations. This optimism affects everyday life. Overall, optimistic people are more psychologically resilient and vigorous in life. This matters because complex society relies on people believing that the work of coordination it takes to organize everyone will pay off. Of course, the playful person will not be naive, oblivious to negative influences or obstacles in the way of quality leisure time. The optimistic person can call out unfair games where someone may be cheating, humiliating opponents, or missing the point of the activity altogether. She can rally against unjust communities and immoral individuals who may discriminate against people wanting to join the activity or play the game. But the injustices of the world would not dull her edge so much that she refuses to cut through the challenges of everyday life. When playful people lose the sense of optimism, they merely go through the motions of leisure activities. Maybe prodigies could be good without the optimism, but few teammates would enjoy playing with a dispirited person, and no good audience would enjoy watching a broken performer. Sociality. By now, it should be obvious that my conception of playfulness is irreducibly social. This also comes from Aristotle. A virtuous person is always sensitive to other people and the way she directly contributes to others' happiness. Outside, maybe, the virtues of courage, temperance, and wisdom, the majority of Aristotle's virtues are social, regulating our relationships with one another. Generosity, magnanimity, mildness and temper, truthfulness and self-presentation, wittiness, and friendliness. And of the 10 books of the Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle dedicates 1 to justice and 2 to friendship. After all, Aristotle argues that no person would choose a life full of wealth, power, or any other good if it somehow prevented her from having friends. And in conditions of political corruption and disarray, as in tyranny, Aristotle says that no friendships would be possible. Without others, we cannot be happy. And even when we have others, if they are not treated justly, we cannot live well either. This is why Aristotle calls us political animals. Humans are inseparable from the groups of people that they live with and the institutions they create. And anyone who is completely separable is either a beast or a god, but definitely not a good human. The playful person, therefore, is sensitive to social considerations. Philosopher Maria Lugones makes that point when she writes, "Lack of playfulness is not symptomatic of lack of ease, but lack of health. I am not a healthy being in worlds that construct me as unplayful." Lugones understands playfulness as something that flows from the self in the presence of other people and the worlds they create and inhabit. When we are playful in relation to other people and the worlds we collectively interact in. She argues that when those worlds are harsh, we are not playful, and so part of ourselves wilts. Lugones therefore characterizes the ideal of playfulness as loving playfulness. The loving attitude constitutes part of the disposition for her. Lugones argues that we must be loving because the self is at stake. She specifies that being lovingly playful involves being open to many things: surprises, being a fool, self-construction, and reconstruction of the worlds that we inhabit, and involves interacting with one another despite uncertainty, sacred rules being challenged, firm aspects of ourselves being open to change, and the selves of others and their worlds being open to change as well. I agree with Lugones that playfulness involves others, and if we do not take them into consideration, we cannot be playful. Ignoring others or mistreating them means that we are not playing or being playful. So even though some leisure activities might be solitary, obtaining leisure and using that time invariably involves social considerations. Playful people are aware of how their play affects themselves and others in both their presence and absence. I'm not necessarily describing just laws and institutions here, but more small-scale senses of justice in personal virtue and social interactions. But playful people undoubtedly help communities become just. What we do in our leisure has wider implications. William James, for example, envisioned a world without war. But unlike pacifists who simply argue that war has no positive effects, he is honest to war's deep ambivalence. It can improve individuals through disciplined, courageous action, and it can unify societies in large-scale cooperative efforts to make people proud. Far from a justification of war, he wants us to find a different activity, practice, or project that gets all the benefits without the horrors. This inspired civil service programs, but it could also espouse better ways of using our leisure. Professional sports leagues, art competitions, and international charity efforts could do the same, as might video games. Games researcher Jane McGonigal defends the idea that serious gamers make deep social connections with people that they play with, and they find ways of being connected to bigger projects that other people also find meaningful. Increasingly, leisure activities are explicitly connected to the most significant aspects of our lives, not only as individuals, but also as communities. Increasingly, in our leisure activities, we wake up to the world and begin to refuse to be satisfied with traditional values and social arrangements. But before we can revolutionize, we must have some sort of vision. Ursula K. Le Guin argued why speculative fiction, something many read during their leisure, is so instrumental to justice. Hard times are coming, when we'll be wanting the voices of writers who can see alternatives to how we live now, can see through our fear-stricken society and its obsessive technologies to other ways of being, and even imagine real grounds for hope. We'll need writers who can remember freedom, poets, visionaries, realists of a larger reality. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. But then, so did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, very often in our art, the art of words. For Le Guin, writers of fantasy and science fiction dare to challenge the base assumptions of society and therefore reality. Whenever writers spend time inventing utopias, and whenever readers inhabit their realities, people begin to believe that things could be different. insidious forms of oppression go unchallenged because the social arrangements that sustain them seem obvious. But when we spend our leisure imagining other worlds, we gain new fulcrums to lift away contemporary burdens to clear space for a better future. Emile Chiron states the point more dramatically. We must be thankful to the civilizations which have not taken an overdose of seriousness, which have played with values and taken their pleasure in begetting and destroying them. Playful people learn values and use them fluidly, but they also actively pursue alternatives and abandon obsolescence. In the buffet of life and social arrangements, playful people have sampled all the dishes, and they are less likely to fixate on ones because it is familiar. Philosopher Michael Ridge says it best. Playfulness is thus transgressive and generates an exhilarating sense of freedom. Again, I hope that I have not made playfulness seems like it is justice in the macro sense. It is not necessarily so legally or institutionally focused. But given the far-reaching effects of self-improvement and community engagement, no just society will lack playful people. Playfulness and a good life. I have given no strict definition of play or leisure, nor have I tried to categorize all of the activities that a playful person might do. Instead, I have argued that to face our leisure time well, we need to be playful. And to be playful, we must be serious, creative, humble, optimistic, and social. Playful people use their leisure time to move themselves closer to happiness. My hope is that the practical orientation of playfulness and its relation to character, flourishing, and justice sidestep many of the concerns for defining precisely play, rest, idleness, leisure, sport, art, or whatever we do in our free time. The sketch of playfulness offered here connects everything to happiness. And I think this connection to happiness shows why contemporary people need to safeguard leisure and consider its use as diligently as we consider fear, pleasure, friendship, wealth, justice, or any of the perennial concerns of philosophy. It is during our leisure that we find intrinsic enjoyment in activities, and it is during our leisure that we can shape ourselves into better people and form intimate and strong communities. My theory has implications for people as individuals and as groups. As an individual, the playful person stays committed to leisure activities, to learn about them as much as she can, to push them forward, and to socialize with other people. Being playful means that she cares to use her leisure time for enjoyable self-exploration and self-improvement. But a playful person is not solipsistic. Being playful means being sensitive to the social demands of justice. Despite bullies using the justification of just playing around, exclusionary or destructive play deserves repudiation. In some ways, I part with everyday uses of the term playful. Colloquially, playful is comfortably allied with mischievous or outright malicious people. But on this Aristotelian account, playfulness must be nested within the context of a person's life and our journey toward happiness, and it must also be nested within the concerns for health of our communities. Playfulness makes leisure answerable to the concerns of developing a good character and working toward justice. I can imagine that critics will wonder whether what I have described as playfulness is a misnomer. Whenever we call someone playful, they might ask, do we really mean that she is fundamentally and foremost someone who uses her leisure well? However, I know of no other word to use, and I know of no other framework than a virtue of playfulness to organize the panoply of claims about play in its corresponding arena of leisure. In this broad area of life that we all face, it seems that playfulness can serve as a guide for assessing our behavior. And without a guide, I think that we risk getting lost on the way to happiness. So what can my guide do? First, I think it offers a way to organize the divided opinions of philosophers on play. Why might Heraclitus or Rousseau champion play? Well, they understand play as deeply creative, cooperative, and optimistic ways that play impacts our lives. These things encourage us to develop ourselves, to help others, and to savor many of life's experiences. Philosophers who champion play rightly emphasize the positive aspects. Why then do Plato and Aristotle criticize some forms of play so harshly? Well, they understand that play, with the wrong mood and motivation, can train people to be recalcitrant to new ideas, mean-spirited toward others, and indulgent in their own impulses. They rightly notice that play is not amoral. Its moral stakes can be used for exploitation and exclusion just as much as enjoyment, self-improvement, or authenticity. Both camps of philosophers are sensitive to the moral stakes of play, and playfulness as a character trait helps us to assess the multivalent ethical aspects of our characters in relation to leisure and living well. Leisure can renew us, shelter us in life's storms, and provide a showcase for life's joys. But leisure also presents opportunities for us to become callous, unjust, and attuned to the wrong things in life. The ambivalence of play and any of the activities taken up in leisure shows exactly why playfulness is useful here. Assessing the activity of play in relation to the character trait of playfulness contextualizes the intrinsically enjoyable activities within the moral pursuit of living well with others. Focusing on playfulness rather than play gives us a vantage to assess play. Seriousness, creativity, humility, optimism, and sociality are dimensions for measuring leisure activities in the space of morality. Second, my book not only deals with the philosophy and scholarly opinions, it not only deals with philosophy and scholarly opinions. I think that it deals with history and the future, figuring out how to assess real examples of human behavior. My book is a proposal that we keep two questions in mind when evaluating the ethical and political implications of leisure activities. One, can someone who does that thing remain a properly playful person? And two, can someone living a full, flourishing human life Two, can someone live a full, flourishing human life while doing that thing? Making moral assessments of play would need to hold up to the scrutiny of both. Let us consider some examples to see how this works. First, consider history. Romans slew prisoners in creative games in the Colosseum. Catholic officials tortured heretics with innovative engineering. Nazi physicians invented novel experiments for castration and torture in extreme conditions. But should we call these perpetrators playful, even if they did these things with glee? On my theory, no. They fail various aspects of the character trait defined here. These behaviors developed in the perpetrators many vicious thoughts, feelings, and motivations. Their actions took them further away from flourishing. And on the criteria of playfulness, they fail especially the social requirement. So while these vicious examples of play may be creative in some ways, they would never be playful on my account. Playfulness is firmly fixed to a person's own well-being, and because a person's well-being is attached to the well-being of her community, the trait must be assessed holistically and historically. And I would say that the decline of Rome, the conquest of Catholic countries, and World War II Germany all show precisely why such playful people did not flourish. It is only when actions of play or instances of creativity are abstracted away from particular persons and their historical circumstances that they can be judged as playful. The particularity must be heeded. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. The impacts of playful activities must be connected to how they affect the players and the people around them. When this is done, these counterexamples fail the criteria I laid out, but these are relatively clear cases of unplayful behavior. I also think that my theory can offer new ways of assessing novel and difficult cases. For example, consider Marco Evaristi's art piece Helena. Evaristi arranged 10 brand new blenders in a row, all plugged in, all immaculate, all sporting a yellow button that would clearly turn the blenders on. Inside each blender's pitcher were two things: water and a live swimming goldfish. Anyone viewing the exhibit could see what would happen if they had activated the switch, and they had every opportunity to do so. Authorities shut the installation down after 2 days, but 16 goldfish died in the meantime. In my mind, there is no doubt that Evaristi was using his leisure to make art and play. I would even say that he was properly serious. He learned his craft. He was properly creative. No one had done this before. He was even humble and optimistic enough to get the installation approved and displayed in a museum in Denmark. But also, in my mind, there is no doubt that he was not playful, at least not in my sense of the term. He failed to take many things into consideration. First, I do not think that he appreciated what his art said about him as a person. Maybe he didn't care, but that does not bode well either. Second, I do not think that he appreciated how his play would affect the goldfish, the people in the museum who flipped the switches, or the people in the audience of the spectacle. All of this shows disregard for what I have called sociality, and it shows why art and play are rightly nested within ethical categories. My criteria for playfulness offer a way of beginning a conversation about why this case is unsettling. But my theory also has something to say about more ambiguous cases, such as enjoying art that portrays villains as attractive or spending ample time with the kind of art that Plato would have expelled from the Callipolis, or that Aristotle might have beat people for. Should playful people enjoy Vladimir Nabokov's erotic descriptions of a prepubescent girl, or Cormac McCarthy's account of Judge Holden's murders and rapes? The issues here are complicated and long-standing, and I can offer no definitive solution. However, even though this account will not settle the debates about the moral evaluation of art or games, it can offer new metrics by which to assess them. On the terms laid out here, the immoral effects must be demonstrable. It must be shown how certain activities affect our habits and how that detracts, if it does, from our achievement of happiness. Aristotelians always play an empirical game in ethics and politics, and in weighing the immorality of play, the empirical evidence must do the heavy lifting, and the lifelong goal of happiness must do the judging. There are no in-principle judgments here, only probabilities for defilement of character or demolition of happiness. We must, in good faith, ask, does the person who enjoys these activities in this way end up worse off as a direct result of the activity? It must be specific. A person who reads McCarthy for allusions to Dante or Melville differs from a person who reads McCarthy because the violence is cool and he would like to be Judge Holden. Same for American Psycho or Wolf of Wall Street or The Joker or any artwork where toxic people clearly miss the point. My examples so far have been negative, but supposedly good things deserve scrutiny too, such as Aristotle's most celebrated leisure activity, contemplating theory, especially as done by philosophers. Even if my theory properly denounces immoral uses of leisure, would I say that philosophy should be evaluated in terms of playfulness? Is philosophy just another leisure activity? First, for non-professional philosophers, yes, philosophy is done during leisure, so I do think that playfulness evaluates it. And insofar as the philosophy is serious, creative, humble, optimistic, and social, I would call it properly playful. I think the best forms of philosophy are: good philosophy must be all those things to climb the icy heights of reason and apply the knowledge from the celestial realm to the teeming, balmy world of prudence. But is this a relegation of philosophy to mere leisure activity? I do not think so. Calling the best forms of philosophy playful is only an insult for those who do not understand how important being playful is. In judging philosophy by playfulness, I emphasize the question of whether philosophy might rightly be integrated into a life lived well. Playfulness will likely cut against some forms of academic, professionalized philosophy at universities today, and instead, it would advocate for the philosophy that the ancient world knew: concerns about the deep nature of daily life, puzzles about how we investigate ideas, and assessments of the values that we hold for whether they help us to live well. Ancient philosophy was public, social, and consistently applied to everyday life. This is not to insult contemporary philosophy and its specialized tasks any more than it is to insult contemporary microbiology for its esoteric investigations of cellular mechanisms and organic chemical reactions. It is just to say that philosophy, in the broad way that the ancients understood it, is very much a part of a playful person's life, or really anyone who explicitly evaluates her own life. Ask an athlete or a musician what makes for the best and worst people in her field, and you will get a philosophy of her specialization. Philosophy, in the narrow sense that academics and administrators refer to it in colleges, is not necessary for living well. When Aristotle celebrated philosophy and theory, I do not think that he had in mind what gets published in most top-tier journals today. I think that Aristotle had in mind the literal meaning of the words he used. Philosophia comes from philia, meaning love, and sophia, meaning wisdom. Theoria comes from theoreo, the verb for spectating or contemplating, a verb just as appropriate describing the audience of a play, an ambassador at a public event, or a philosopher thinking. The point is not abstruseness. The point is participating in, reflecting on, and making sense of everything. When deeming intellectual activity necessary for a good life, I think Aristotle meant philosophy and theory in these broader senses. Philosophia and theoria are the activities of neither brutes nor snobs. They are the activities of people who can immerse themselves in a singular moment and then reflect on what that moment means. They are the activities of people who play and let that play affect their thinking about life. During the COVID pandemic, we saw very clearly that those who could not sit with themselves and their thoughts and explore fictional worlds fared much worse than those who could. Thought, including imagination, touches every aspect of life. But Aristotle knew that we were so much more than thinking beings. We have bodies that must grow and reproduce. We have desires that push and pull us. We have emotions that attract and repulse us toward and away from life's cornucopia of goods. We have motivations and dispositions that bias our thoughts and give momentum to our actions. And we are not people in the full sense of the term, apart from friends, fellow citizens, and the complex interactions that we have with people all over the world. Aristotle, no doubt, was an intellectualist, holding that reason is the supreme faculty that organizes everything. But leaders have nothing without followers, and followers can always push back. Humans are complex, and Aristotle knew this. To read him only as an intellectual with academic concerns is to abandon his complex psychology and ambivalent assessments of most things in life. And to see philosophy as only what credentialed philosophers do is to forget the original meanings of the terms involved. Leisure affects our lives. Without it, no person is happy. But if a person only spends his leisure watching The Office while browsing Facebook and Instagram on a cell phone, he has missed the point of life. We may do this on occasion, but if we never delve more seriously into crafts, activities, or games that challenge us and bring us closer to other people, we waste opportunities to understand ourselves and others, as well as to improve our own lives and the lives of others. Playfulness as a virtue deserves as much consideration as the classical virtues like courage, temperance, and justice. And play, as an activity, deserves investigation as much as other activities like making money and friends. If we neglect playfulness and what it teaches us about our characters and the goals of our lives, we neglect reflection on a crucial aspect of being human. Aristotle said that humans are political. Marx said that humans are productive. I say that humans are playful. Happy people are playful people, and no happy person fails at playing well.